So let's start with the setting. Picture this. Pahalgam. It's high up in Jammu and Kashmir, often called mini Switzerland, you know. Rolling green meadows, snow-capped peaks all around, just stunningly beautiful.
Truly, a place you'd imagine is utterly peaceful, a real escape.
Exactly. But then, April 22nd, 2025, that peace was just shattered. A terror attack. 26 people killed.
26 lives lost, and mostly tourists who were there precisely for that tranquility. It's just horrifying.
It really is. And what happened next wasn't just grief. It was this incredibly rapid, intense escalation between India and Pakistan. Two nuclear powers, remember?
Uh-huh. An already tense relationship just went critical almost overnight.
So today, that's what we're diving into, the immediate fallout from that terrible day in Pahalgam. We'll look at the chain reaction, the responses from both sides, and try to unpack what it all means for their very long and complicated history.
And we're piecing this together from, the news reports, the analyses that came out thick and fast right after the incident.
Our mission here, for you listening, is to get beyond just the headlines. We want to really explore the immediate consequences, how fast things moved, and where this leaves things now.
It's that contrast that's so stark, isn't it? The beauty of the place, Pahalgam, specifically around the Baisaran Meadow, and then this awful violence.
26 dead, 25 Indian tourists, 1 Nepali citizen. The scale of it is significant.
Absolutely. And how quickly the blame game started and the claim of responsibility. The resistance front, which, many sources link straight back to Lashkar-e-Taiba based in Pakistan.
Right, they claimed it. And India didn't just take their word for it, or rather, they took it very seriously. Their National Investigation Agency, the NIA, jumped right in.
And they moved fast.
Yeah.
Identifying the attackers, 4 of them, saying 2 were Pakistani nationals. It gives you a sense of the certainty on the Indian side.
Yeah, there was even that side story about a tip-off for a flight, Chennai to Colombo on May 4th. Turned out to be nothing, but it shows the high alert level.
It paints India's perspective very clearly, doesn't it? That this wasn't random. It was, in their view, a calculated hit on tourism, on security itself.
And their response was just as calculated, you could say. Swift, multi-pronged.
Oh, definitely. That May 2nd announcement, just days later, a total ban on all imports from Pakistan, not just some things, everything.
Everything, like mangoes, pharmaceuticals, the lot.
The lot.
Yeah.
Direct, indirect, all banned. Now, we should remember, trade was already way down after 2019, right? After Pulwama, India slapped on that massive 200% import duty.
Good point. So the actual dollar amount might not be huge in the grand scheme of India's global trade.
Exactly. Compared to India's, $900 billion global trade, the Pakistan trade was tiny even before this.
Mm.
But symbolically, this total ban is huge. It's like saying, we're done.
Locking the door completely and citing national security and public policy, pretty unambiguous language.
Very. And it wasn't just trade.
No, it felt like one thing after another. The port restrictions were a big one, banning Pakistani ships from Indian ports.
Under the Merchant Shipping Act, Section 411, and then Pakistan immediately did the same to Indian ships.
It's like that neighbor dispute escalating, isn't it? You don't just argue, you block their driveway. It feels very physical, very final.
It severs a major connection, and then halting and parcel services too, air and land. In today's world, stopping mail feels almost archaic, but deeply symbolic again.
It cuts off even those basic links. And like you said, this is layered on top of things already in place. The Indus Waters Treaty talks suspended. The Atari-Wagah border crossing heavily restricted.
It adds up to an almost complete breakdown in any kind of normal interaction.
And then Prime Minister Modi's statement on May 3rd, standing next to Angola's president, vowing firm and decisive action against the terrorists and their backers, that really underlined the mood.
No ambiguity there. And Pakistan's reaction, maybe not surprising, but it mirrored India's speed, didn't it?
Yeah, May 3rd again. Their Ministry of Maritime Affairs announces the counterban on Indian ships.
Citing their own security and economic interests, as reported by Dawn newspaper, I believe. Though they did leave a little wiggle room, mentioning potential case-by-case exemptions.
Still, the main message was tit for tat, and Prime Minister Sharif saying Pakistan was falsely accused, offering that international investigation.
Which India immediately shot down. It just shows the absolute lack of trust, that deep chasm between them.
And then the military flexing, also on May 3rd.
Right, the successful test of the Abdali weapon system. Surface-to-surface missile, 450-kilometer range.
Pakistan called it routine. India called it a blatant provocation.
The timing certainly makes it look like more than just routine testing, doesn't it? In that atmosphere, it sends a very clear signal, a show of force.
It's like shouting in an already explosive argument. If we just zoom out for a second, This fits into a long trouble history, right? Since 1947.
Decades of it. Conflict, suspicion, brief thaws, then back to frost. And Kashmir is almost always at the heart of it.
Constant accusations flying back and forth, sponsoring terrorism on one side, heavy-handedness in Kashmir on the other.
And we talk about the trade figures being small. India's exports to Pakistan were about $447 million in the 10 months before this. Imports barely $500,000. Peanuts compared to India's total trade.
So the bans are more about the statement than the economic damage?
I think that's fair to say. It's about drawing a hard line, retreating from even pretending things could be normal anytime soon. It's symbolic defiance.
And the rest of the world is watching, obviously. What were the initial international reactions?
Well, the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth came out on May 2nd, expressing solidarity with India, affirming its right to defend itself. Pretty clear backing there.
Okay. What about others? Europe?
The EU, through Kaja Kallas, called for restraint on both sides. They've spoken to officials in both Delhi and Islamabad, trying to calm things down.
And Iran offered to mediate.
Yes, Iran stepped in with an offer to mediate, which adds another interesting layer, given Iran's own complex relationships in the region.
So you've got these high-level diplomatic moves, but what about the real-world impact on actual people?
Yeah, that's where it gets really immediate and often painful. Think about the small traders.
The ones who actually relied on that trickle of cross-border business.
Exactly. Pakistani fruit exporters suddenly losing their market. Indian textile merchants maybe waiting for shipments that now won't arrive. Their livelihoods just, boom, disrupted.
And the port closures must mess with shipping generally, not just India-Pakistan routes.
For sure. Ships might have to reroute, take longer journeys, burn more fuel. That pushes up costs for everyone eventually. And Air India apparently raised concerns about Pakistani airspace being closed off to them again. It just ripples outwards.
Then there's the human cost, the really direct stuff, those Pakistani nationals in India.
Right, the visa revocations, the May 1st deadline to leave. Reports said about 70 people were stranded for a bit before they could get back via Wagah.
Imagine that uncertainty. Families potentially split up, lives thrown into chaos by these big political decisions.
It always comes back to the human dimension, which reminds us of the victims in Pahalgam. N. Ramachandran from Kerala. Just one name, one story, one life ended.
Kerala's chief minister, Pinarayi Vijayan, called it an assault on humanity itself. That really captures it, I think.
It does, and that leads to the search for justice, right?
Yeah.
The NIA is digging deep in Kashmir, looking for local links.
They were looking at that shopkeeper who wasn't around on the day of the attack.
Yeah, scrutinizing anyone potentially involved. And the Border Security Force picked up a Pakistani ranger near Srinagar around May 3rd, taking him in for questioning. Another piece of the puzzle, maybe?
Even the UN Security Council weighed in, condemning the attack, though they had to use careful wording, apparently, to avoid directly pointing fingers, thanks to some diplomatic wrangling.
Yeah, the report suggested some wordplay to get consensus, possibly involving Pakistan and China's positions. But the condemnation itself still stands.
And domestically in India, politics kicked in hard.
Oh, yes. The Opposition Congress Working Committee demanded a probe with a deadline. And then you had figures like BJP MP Nishikant Dubey making some pretty wild, unsubstantiated claims. It just pours fuel on the fire.
So where are we right now? It sounds incredibly tense.
That's the word, tense. The line of control in Kashmir is described as being, quote, hotter than a summer day in Rajasthan. Reports of Pakistani troops firing for 10 straight days up to May 4th.
That does not sound good. So what happens next? What are the possibilities?
Well, best case, maybe mediation works, perhaps Iran or the UN brokers some kind of de-escalation, dialogue restarts somehow. Seems unlikely right now, but it's the best case.
And worst case?
Further escalation, more border clashes, maybe something bigger.
Right.
Significant disruption to regional, maybe even global trade instability.
And the most likely scenario, realistically?
Probably what we're seeing now continues. A tense, uneasy stalemate. A sort of frozen conflict, but one where the ice is thin and could crack at any moment. High alert, low trust, continued friction.
It really hammers home that the Pahalgam attack and everything that followed isn't just another news cycle.
Not at all. It's a stark reminder of how fragile peace is in that part of the world, how deep the mistrust runs, and how quickly things can unravel.
It's so important to remember the human element in all this. The lives lost, the lives disrupted.
Absolutely. Beyond the politics and the strategy, there's immense human suffering. And maybe focusing on that shared humanity, that desire for peace, is, well, it's essential, even if the path there seems blocked right now.
It does leave you wondering, though, doesn't it? After all these decades, all these cycles of violence and retaliation,
What would it actually take to break the pattern? Is there a point where both sides just say enough? What fundamental shift needs to happen, not just in policy, but in mindset, to even imagine a different future?
a huge question. And maybe one without an easy answer right now.
Definitely not easy. It's something for all of us, and especially for you listening, to think about long after this conversation ends.
Well, our goal, as always, was to give you a clearer picture, based on the facts as we understand them, of this really complex and fast-moving situation. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.